The Israel-Gaza conflict has been a horrifying spectacle of destruction and loss of life. This latest chapter, raging since October 2023, has become a grim milestone. It is the deadliest period for journalists covering conflict in over 3 decades. Amidst the chaos and bloodshed, journalists have worked tirelessly. They strive to bring the truth to light, often at a terrible cost. The Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, has confirmed the deaths of over 170 journalists and media workers as of February 28, 2025. The vast majority of these victims were Palestinian. This figure represents a shocking escalation in the dangers faced by those reporting from conflict zones. Beyond the staggering death toll, dozens of journalists have been injured, some severely. Many bear both physical and psychological scars from their experiences. The trauma of witnessing horrific violence, losing colleagues, and facing constant danger takes a heavy toll. Furthermore, several journalists remain missing. Their fates are unknown, adding another layer of anguish to an already dire situation. Numerous journalists have been arrested while attempting to carry out their duties. These detentions, often without charge or due process, represent a blatant attack on press freedom. They highlight the vulnerability of journalists in conflict zones and the risks they take to inform the world. The risks journalists face in conflict zones are tragically clear. They are often caught in the crossfire, targeted by snipers, or killed or injured in bombings. Yet despite these dangers, journalists remain committed to their mission. They understand the importance of bearing witness and giving a voice to the voiceless. The stories they tell are often harrowing accounts of human suffering, displacement, and loss. They expose war crimes, document human rights abuses, and hold the powerful accountable. Their work sheds light on the true cost of conflict, not just in terms of casualties, but also in terms of the shattered lives and communities left behind. In the fog of war, journalists are often mistaken for targets, particularly when embedded with military units. Despite the perils, journalists remain vital to our understanding of conflict. They provide a window into war-torn regions, bringing the realities of conflict to living rooms around the world. Their work challenges narratives, exposes injustices, and helps to shape public opinion. Evidence strongly suggests that journalists have not merely been caught in the crossfire but have been deliberately targeted. The CPJ has confirmed at least 11 cases of journalists killed in targeted attacks by Israeli forces. These are not accidents or instances of mistaken identity. They are murders, plain and simple. The CPJ is actively investigating over 130 additional cases of journalists killed or injured in circumstances that raise serious concerns about deliberate targeting. These investigations are complex and often hampered by the ongoing conflict. The deliberate targeting of journalists constitutes a grave breach of international law. Journalists are protected as civilians under the Geneva Conventions. Attacks directed at them are war crimes that demand accountability. Those responsible, both on the ground and in positions of command, must be brought to justice. The targeting of journalists is not only a violation of international law, but also a direct assault on freedom of the press. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, have consistently denied deliberately targeting journalists. They maintain that their operations are conducted in accordance with international law, and that they take every precaution to avoid civilian casualties. The IDF has repeatedly claimed that Hamas uses civilians, including journalists, as human shields, putting them in harm's way. Furthermore, the IDF has accused some journalists, particularly those working for Al Jazeera and other Arab media outlets, of being biased or even complicit with Hamas. Critics argue that the IDF's accusations against journalists are often unsubstantiated and intended to deflect criticism of their conduct. They point to the disproportionate number of Palestinian journalists killed or injured compared to their Israeli counterparts as evidence of a double standard. The IDF's claims of Hamas using journalists as human shields, while serious if true, must be independently verified. The burden of proof lies with the IDF to provide credible evidence to support these allegations. Regardless, the IDF has a legal and moral obligation to distinguish between combatants and civilians, including journalists. Section 5. Faces of the Fallen. Behind the statistics are real people with names, faces, and families. Each life lost represents a devastating blow to loved ones, colleagues, and the pursuit of truth. One such story is that of Ismail Al-Ghul, a young Palestinian photojournalist known for his dedication and bravery. Al-Ghul had covered numerous conflicts, documenting the human toll with empathy and compassion. He was killed on July 31, 2024, when an Israeli airstrike hit a building he was using as a makeshift office. Another victim was Rami Al-Rifi, a cameraman who worked for a local news agency. Al-Rifi was known for his infectious laugh and his unwavering commitment to his work. These are just two of the many heartbreaking stories of journalists who have lost their lives in the line of duty. Section 6. Al Jazeera, a case in point. The experiences of Al Jazeera, the Qatar-based news organization, offer a chilling example of the dangers journalists face in the Israel-Gaza conflict. Al Jazeera has been repeatedly targeted, with its offices bombed and its journalists killed, injured, and arrested. The network has accused Israel of deliberately targeting its journalists to silence its coverage of the conflict. The IDF has accused Al Jazeera of biased reporting, and even of acting as a mouthpiece for Hamas. However, Al Jazeera maintains that it is committed to objective reporting, and that it is simply fulfilling its duty to cover all sides of the conflict. The targeting of Al Jazeera has drawn international condemnation, with media watchdogs and human rights groups expressing serious concerns about the safety of its journalists. The network's experience highlights the vulnerabilities of journalists in conflict zones, particularly those perceived as critical of one side or the other. When journalists are targeted, it not only endangers their lives, but also undermines the public's right to know. Section 7. Reporting under siege. Reporting from Gaza has always been challenging, but the recent escalation in violence has made it more perilous than ever. The Gaza Strip, densely populated and under blockade, offers few safe havens for journalists. Movement is severely restricted, access to information is tightly controlled, and the constant threat of violence hangs heavy in the air. Palestinian journalists in particular face immense challenges. They often lack the resources and support available to their international counterparts. They are often caught between the demands of their profession and the pressures of their communities, facing accusations of bias or even treason from both sides. International journalists seeking to enter Gaza face significant bureaucratic hurdles. Once inside Gaza, they face the same dangers as their Palestinian colleagues, with the added burden of operating in an unfamiliar and often hostile environment. Despite these challenges, journalists remain committed to reporting from Gaza. Section 8. The world reacts. The international community has condemned the violence in the Israel-Gaza conflict and expressed concern over the high number of journalist casualties. The United Nations has called for an independent investigation into the deaths of journalists and for those responsible to be held accountable. Several countries have also called for a ceasefire and a resumption of peace talks. The International Criminal Court has launched an investigation into alleged war crimes committed by both sides in the conflict. This includes the targeting of civilians, including journalists. Media watchdogs and press freedom organizations have also condemned the attacks on journalists and called for greater protection for those reporting from conflict zones. They have urged both sides to respect the rights of journalists to carry out their work without fear of intimidation or violence. While the international community's response has been largely condemnatory, it has been criticized by some as being too little, too late. The question remains whether these words of condemnation will translate into meaningful action to protect journalists in the future. Section 9. A cost too high. The Israel-Gaza conflict has exacted a horrific toll on journalists, with over 170 killed and many more injured, missing, or arrested. These journalists were not soldiers or combatants, but individuals who risked their lives to bear witness to the horrors of war and bring the truth to light. Their deaths represent a profound loss, not only for their families and colleagues but also for the pursuit of truth and accountability. The targeting of journalists is not a new phenomenon, but the scale and brutality of the attacks in this conflict are deeply concerning. It is a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who strive to report from conflict zones and the need for greater protection for journalists. When journalists are killed or silenced, the world is deprived of crucial information about the realities of conflict. This makes it more difficult to hold those responsible for atrocities accountable and to build lasting peace. The pursuit of truth and justice depends on it.